What a richly colorful, warm, vibrant place Africa is. Do you love it as much as I do? Well, of course, there's much more to Africa than bushveld, drum beats and kapana. Hello there, welcome to lesson 2 in our history video learning series from NAMCOL. Today we are talking about different types of political rule on the continent. They are the traditional leadership, monarchies, colonial rule, a few democracies and authoritarian regimes, and we will discuss each of these briefly. Our lesson objective then is that learners should, after watching this lesson, be able to discuss the different types of political rule used in Africa. Thanks for being with us. Let's talk about Africa. It is the world's second largest and second most populous continent. In other words, it's the second biggest and second most crowded continent in the world. Africa covers 6% of the Earth's total surface area. In Africa, Algeria is the largest African country by area, but Nigeria is the largest by population. Africa lies on both sides of the equator and includes numerous climate areas. It is the only continent to stretch from the northern mild weather to the southern mild weather zones. But we really want to talk about the people of Africa. Did you know in 2013 there were 1.1 billion people living in Africa? These are people of many different ethnic groups. They have diverse origins with different cultural, language, and societal features. There are 54 fully recognized sovereign states or countries in Africa, apart from 9 territories which are not yet independent. Africa is the youngest continent in terms of its population. 50% of Africans are 19 years old or younger. This may also indicate that we do not live very long. Now, despite many fast-growing economies, Africa continues to have societal issues troubling their nations. Differences within Africa's geography, such as the varying climates across the continent, have also served to nurture wide-ranging lifestyles among its various populations. Some populations live in deserts, some in jungles, and some in modern cities across the continent. The colonial experience of African nations also strongly influenced the development of different political systems. Is there a problem with politics in Africa, and if so, what is it?
Well, not significant, or not specifically problems in the political system, but maybe that there is a lot of interactivity missing. There's a lot of preach about how much it is, how democracy is that of people, and there's referendums and people need to answer or be a part of decision making, but there's a lot of that lacking. It's happening, but not that much. So if there's a problem, it's that a lot is being done, but more should be done.
Yes, probably it's a problem because we have too many people suffering in Africa. Now, if you walk down to Katutura there, you can find people, they are living in abject poverty, where they don't have even water sanitation. So I think the government must look at those people that are suffering. They must try to do something. Because now, as you see, those people, they've been forsaken. They are not living in under good condition. So I think something must be done.
One cannot say that there is a problem with the politics in Africa, because as of now, most of the countries, all of the countries in Africa has reached democracy. So currently there's no problem. It's fine like it is, because citizens are allowed to vote for the president that they feel, or the ruling party. But somehow it's like Africa is afraid of change. So even though we have a democracy, it's like it's always the one party winning. It's like Namibia, for instance. We have one ruling party for the past 24 years that we've been independent. So there's not really a problem, but I feel that then sometimes there can be a change in Africa.
Personally, I would think there are problems in the politics that Africa generally practices. I think most of the people in Africa don't really have a say when they vote. I mean, there's always like a back influence when they vote. Like they're either emotionally, how do I put it, emotionally influenced by the political leaders or the political party that is involved. That's what I think.
Yes, there is a problem with politics in Africa due to the fact that people don't actually give other people chances. They are too old. I mean, we should get new leaders in Africa.
And what political system would best suit Africa?
Probably one where there's more action and less talk. Short and sweet. One where people are really being empowered and encouraged, and we're not just doing things because we're power hungry and because we think we're being imperialized or colonialized, or because we're being put in a position where we're constantly made to think that there's always somebody that's trying to take from us, but one where it really is Africa for Africans, but also Africa for the world.
I think communism will do. Our country now is falling under democracy, whereby the rich will become more rich and the poor become more poorer. So as you see now, there are many people that are suffering now in our country because of the system that we are using. I think the ideology must be changed. Let's see, even in Africa, we must even try to come up with our own system, as we don't have our own system. The ideology that you are using, we refer it from other countries, so we must come up with our own system. And I think the good idea, I like the idea of Dr. Sam Nyoma, where he said, we Africa, we must unite, we must become one. I think that would be a good idea. If we become one, we can become more stronger and we can trade each other through that way.
Right now, a democratic system is the best system, because citizens are allowed to vote for who they want. But even with a democratic system, it's like people are told for who they should vote. So people have the right to vote, but they're also, in the same way, they're also being told for who they should vote. So it doesn't really matter if we're democratic or if we don't.
I think it will be the communist system. I think it's a nice system because it just represents togetherness and unity, and people do things as one. And there might be problems and disadvantages to it, but I personally think that it's a nice system that people actually do things as one, and if a problem occurs, we all solve it as one. I think it's a nice system.
Oh, thank you so much.
I would think that democracy would suit Africa best.
With diverse cultures, Africa features governments ranging from republics to monarchies. But tribal leaders have a lot of power too. How are you, Chief Mbambidumo?
I'm fine, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Chief, what is your tribe?
Himba.
Briefly, how did you become chief?
It's handed down to me through my father's bloodstream.
So there are tribal societies in Africa, and they have traditional leaders, but certainly Namibia also has many tribes, and they all have traditional leaders. But we also have government, who is the boss of whom?
Oh yes, it gets tricky sometimes. Tribal leadership comes way back from the Neolithic period and Iron Age, but still today, indigenous tribal societies still continue living under colonial and independent state. The tribal chiefs represent their tribes or ethnicity in a form of self-government, but under the national government. But the national government also recognizes their tribal authority too.
So, is it just the chief that is important?
Be careful of assuming it is always a man. A woman can hold chieftaincy in her own right or may receive it from her marriage to a male chief. But no, the chief is not the only important one. The most common traditional structure consists of a chairman of a council of elders and a broader popular assembly, almost like the National Council of Namibia. Others that are important in the chieftain system are an alternative or additional war chief in wartime, the hereditary chief, and the medicine man in most spiritual cultures.
Tribal leadership was one of the first organized governments to evolve in Africa, and many groups still practice it today, such as the Samburu of Kenya. Tribes live in a specific territory and follow a tribal headman, Most headmen are males, but it is not uncommon to see female leaders in some tribal communities. They are chosen based on the sense of authority they project, and for abilities such as persuasion and diplomacy, rather than the basis of absolute power. A leader can easily be replaced by the community if he or she fails to be fair or generous. Hundreds of tribes exist today, having survived serious threats to their existence during the era when most of Africa was ruled by European colonial powers from the mid-19th through the mid-20th centuries. A few monarchies still exist in Africa today. These are countries with a king or queen as head of state. Swaziland is an absolute monarchy in which the king holds all the power, while Lesotho is a constitutional monarchy such as Great Britain or Spain. In those kingdoms, the king or queen holds some power, but government lies in the constitution, with a prime minister who is the leader of the largest elected party in parliament. Between the 8th and the 16th centuries, kingdoms developed along Africa's coastlines. Two of the earliest were the Ghana and the Mali empires, which established strong monarchical governments and operated extensive trade routes. Although most African countries today have governments that are democratic, at least in form, Lesotho and Swaziland in southern Africa are two countries that have remained traditional kingdoms. They are small kingdoms and have weak economies, relying on income earned by laborers who work across the border in South Africa's mines and factories. As a system of government, monarchy was more widespread in Africa in the past, but since decolonization, many countries have become republics instead. European colonialism played a significant part in the modern African history. The borders of colonies were drawn internationally so as to cut across African kingdoms and tribal lands, thereby causing divisions among the African peoples. Two methods of colonial government were practiced: direct and indirect rule. With direct rule, Europeans held positions of authority in carrying out managerial and organizational duties, from collecting taxes to recruiting soldiers. Direct rule was practiced mostly by France, which ruled over much of West Africa. Indirect rule characterized rule by Britain. Indirect rule used traditional tribal systems and laws as a foundation on which to build colonial power. Indigenous people who were educated in Europe returned home and were assigned to high government positions in the colony. The end of colonialism brought democracy to Africa. The Western view of democracy calls for a multi-party state with a government. These should be elected by a free vote of the citizens of the country, and there should be political parties which the people support and an independent court system. Because many African countries have been independent for only a few decades, their democratic structures have had little time to develop. As a result, many African democracies are weak and often corrupt. Somalia is the most extreme example. The entire structure of government is lacking, and the country has therefore been labeled a failed state. On the other hand, Tanzania and South Africa are symbols of fairly strong republics with a working democratic system with popularly elected government administrations. These are the two African countries that can be classified as true democracies in the Western sense of the word. In a similar way, Ghana has a US-style system in which the directly elected president serves both as head of state and head of government. Democracies have constitutions or contracts between the government and the people. It is a contract agreeing to rule the way the people want them to, for and on behalf of the majority. But then there are those African countries which the West call flawed democracies. These are states with nominal democratic systems and leaders elected by popular vote. But once elected, the leaders ignore the constitution and laws of the country. Democracies in countries such as Algeria, Burundi, Kenya, and Zimbabwe fall in this category. The democracies are categorized by manipulation of law, frequent constitutional changes, and intimidation of political opponents. These actions make those countries imperfect or flawed democracies. America's Economist Intelligence Unit has rated most African nations as either flawed democracies or hybrid regimes, which is somewhere between a flawed democracy and an authoritarian regime. So lastly, what is an authoritarian style of government? This style is not in vogue in modern politics, so no government in the world would call itself authoritarian. But the reality is that there are governments in Africa whose authority can hardly be described as responsible to the people. The Economist Intelligence Unit lists a number of African countries in this category, including Tunisia, Egypt, and Morocco. However, even they have elected leaders. There is no single country in Africa today that does not hold elections of some sort to appoint their leaders. And the number of military coups on the continent has decreased dramatically in the recent past, which points to a definite drop in authoritarian regimes and towards a more democratic future for Africa. So viewers, here's the problem with Africa's politics. They say when in the 1980s more and more African countries became independent, their economies soon stumbled because they were based on exports of a single commodity, or because the economies did not produce good results. This caused a big number of military coups and political instability. Many newly independent African nations have turned to a single-party system because of poverty and ethnic rivalries. Many of these problems still exist, so to have an African state that is truly democratic is really hard in our day, but we are obviously making progress. Let's see what we have learned today. Tribal chiefs represent their tribe or ethnic group in a form of self-government. Monarchies are countries with a king or queen as head of state, such as Swaziland. Lesotho is a constitutional monarchy where the real power is in the hands of the Prime Minister as leader of the largest elected party in Parliament. Two methods of colonial government were practiced: direct and indirect rule. Colonial experience strongly influenced the development of political systems in Africa. Direct rule was practiced more especially by France, which ruled much of West Africa. Here, Europeans held positions of authority in carrying out administrative duties. Indirect rule characterized rule by Britain like that used in colonial Southern Africa, where traditional tribal systems and laws were used as a foundation on which to build colonial power. Native people were educated in Europe and returned home to take up government positions in the colony. The end of colonialism ushered in democracy. The Western view of democracy calls for a multi-party state with a government elected by a free vote of citizens, political parties, and an independent judiciary. Tanzania and South Africa are quite strong democracies. Most African countries have been independent for only a few decades, and their democratic structures have had little time to develop, so many democracies are weak with a tendency towards corruption. Authoritarian regimes are where the government does not consider itself accountable to the people. Tunisia, Egypt, and Morocco are examples of this. However, viewers, all countries in Africa have elections, and on the whole, political rule in Africa is developing towards democracy. Finally, here is our SMS competition question for today. Please SMS us at 5003 and mention the keyword for this lesson, which is Africa. Then leave a space and type A, B, or C for the answer you choose as correct. Each SMS costs $3 Namibian. And okay, here is the question. Tell us which statement from these three options you think is correct. Political rule in Africa, A, has a tendency towards authoritarianism, B, has an inclination towards monarchies, or C, is developing towards democracy. Thanks again for taking part. The winner of this SMS competition will be announced within 3 days, and if it is you, we will soon contact you to come and collect your prize at a NAMCOL center near wherever you live. I hope you enjoyed watching and learning with us. See you soon again. Bye-bye.